Captain John Reyes opened his eyes slowly. The inside of the escape pod was dark, filled with smoke and flickering lights. Alarms beeped softly. He coughed and reached for the manual release. With a loud hiss, the door opened and a wave of cool, alien air rushed in. Outside, the world was strange. Tall silver trees stretched toward a purple sky. The ground was soft, covered in bluegrass. Strange flying creatures passed overhead, making soft musical sounds. He had landed on Zoltron, a planet ruled by the powerful and proud Valerie Empire. His ship had been shot down by a patrol near their border. His crew? They didn't make it. Now he was alone, not for long. Within minutes, tall figures in shining armor surrounded him. They had elegant faces, glowing eyes, and skin like polished stone.
Ow.
The Valar soldiers did not speak. One of them raised a silver staff, and John felt his body freeze, his muscles locked. He couldn't move, but he was awake, fully aware. They placed him in a hovering cage and took him away. Hours passed. John was brought to a massive city of light and crystal. Buildings floated, roads moved, statues of winged warriors lined the streets. The Valari were known across the galaxy for their beauty, strength, and pride. They believed themselves above all others, especially humans. He was taken to a grand hall filled with nobles. A high platform stood at the end, with a large throne-like seat, and there she sat, Sari Veltana, daughter of the Empress, heir to the throne and feared commander of the Eastern Sky Fleet. Her armor shone like moonlight, and her long dark hair was braided with silver thread. Her eyes, bright like stars, stared at him with a mix of curiosity and coldness. The hall grew. Silent she stood, bow human. Her voice rang out, sharp and commanding. The guard stepped back, expecting the human to tremble, maybe cry, maybe fall. But John Reyes did something unexpected. He smiled, then slowly he dropped to one knee. He placed his right fist over his chest, and bowed his head not clumsily, not out of fear, but with perfect form. Gasps filled the chamber. Even Sari raised an eyebrow. This was not just any bow. It was the rite of respect, a sacred gesture from Valari tradition. Only the highest nobles used it when meeting the royal family. Most Valeri didn't think a human could even learn it, but John had studied them for years. Before he was a captain, he had been a scholar. He had read every scroll, every file, every whisper about the Valar. He admired their culture, their strength, their rituals, their history. Not because he feared them, but because he found them beautiful in their complexity. He had dreamed of standing in their halls, just didn't expect to arrive in chains. Now here he was, bowing not in shame but in understanding. Sari stepped closer. Her eyes narrowed. "Where did you learn that gesture?" John looked up. His voice was calm. "I read. I remember. I respect what deserves respect." The nobles murmured again. Sari studied him. She expected fear. She saw confidence. She expected ignorance. She saw knowledge. "Are you trying to impress me, human?" John didn't blink. "No, princess. Just being honest." Silence again then. Unexpectedly, she smiled, but only for a moment. "You're different," she said, "but still a prisoner." She turned to the guards. "Take him to the glass tower. Give him food, but do not let him speak to anyone. Tomorrow, he will face the games of proving." John didn't move as they took him away again. The games of proving, he had read about those too. Trials meant to break spirits, to test loyalty, to punish, but John didn't feel afraid. As the doors closed behind him, he smiled once more to himself. Bo, human. He had said he had, but not for her power, for the moment, for the dream, for what was coming next. The glass tower was not a prison in the usual way. It had no bars, no dark corners, no heavy doors. Instead, it stood tall and clear like a crystal blade floating above the capital city. John's room was round, with a transparent floor, walls, and ceiling. From there, he could see the entire city glowing in blue and gold. But he was still a prisoner. 2 guards stood at the only door, wearing silver armor and helmets that hid their faces. They said nothing, watched him like statues. John moved slowly, stretching his muscles. His body still ached from the crash. His side had a deep bruise, and his right wrist was sore. But he had no time to rest. He walked to the center of the room and sat cross-legged on the smooth glass floor. He breathed slowly. He remembered every word spoken in the hall. Beau, human, and then the surprise in their eyes when he obeyed, not like a servant, but like a scholar, like someone who understood their customs better than some of their own. That moment gave him an edge, a very small one, but still. Something, he needed that edge. Later, a tray of food floated into the room. It had fruit shaped like stars, bread that shimmered slightly, and a warm drink that smelled of spice and honey. John ate slowly, thinking. His thoughts were not about escape. They were about the games of proving. He had read about them during his research years ago. The Valari didn't torture or punish prisoners with violence. Instead, they used challenges, tests of the mind, the body, and the spirit. Most were meant to break pride or force submission, but for John, they were an opportunity. He smiled, just a little. It was the same smile that had confused the princess earlier. Not a smile of fear, not weakness. A smile of someone who had been preparing for this. The next morning, 2 guards entered. One spoke, "It is time, human." John stood without a word. He followed them through a clear hallway that led down in a spiral. They passed many Valari nobles, some curious, others clearly disapproving. Whispers followed him. "Is that him?" One who bowed. He didn't look afraid. They walked until they reached a grand arena, carved into the side of a glowing mountain. The sky was still purple, and 2 suns floated low on the horizon. Sari was already there. She stood tall. In black and silver robes, her arms crossed. Her eyes locked onto John as he entered. "Welcome, human," she said. "Today you begin the games of proving." John bowed slightly, not the full right this time, just enough to show awareness, not submission. "I'm ready," he said. "Sorry, yes." Lips twitched, almost a smile. "We'll see." Trial 1. The puzzle sphere floating orb appeared in front of John. It changed shapes, colors, and patterns every second. The goal was to solve the pattern sequence and return it to its original form. He had seen these before in old footage from Valari learning centers. John sat cross-legged again, focused. Time moved strangely. He twisted the orb carefully, watching the patterns. The crowd grew silent as he worked, didn't rush. After 10 minutes, the orb turned gold and floated upward. The trial was complete. Sari raised one eyebrow. Interesting trial. 2. The path of blades. John now stood before a narrow path lined with floating blades and shifting platforms. It was a balance test, but also a test of timing and courage. The wrong step meant falling possibly far, maybe forever. John breathed. Once, he ran. His feet moved quickly. He ducked, rolled, jumped, and twisted his body just in time. A blade scraped his shirt. Another almost touched his shoulder, but he made it. He stood at the end of the path, breathing hard but smiling again. This time, even the nobles clapped softly, unsure what to feel. Trial 3, the mirror, words the. Final challenge was not physical. John stood in a dark room with glowing walls. He faced a tall, floating mirror. It showed not his body, but his memories. The mirror spoke in a soft, echoing voice. "Why do you not fear us?" John's reflection showed the crash, the fire, the dead faces of his crew. He swallowed. "I respect you," he said. "I don't fear what I understand." The mirror showed him kneeling before Zari. "Why Beau?" John stood straight, because strength isn't always shown by standing tall. Sometimes it's knowing when to lower your head and when to rise. The mirror grew brightened, then vanished. Back in the arena, John stood before Zari once more. The crowd was silent. He had passed all 3 trials. Zari walked toward him. her boots clicking softly on the stone. "You surprise me again, John Reyes?" He nodded. "I've been studying you for a long time. And yet you still came to our world." "I didn't plan to crash," he said, smiling, "but I'm glad I did." A pause. "Why?" she asked. "Because now I'm finally here, among you. I've always wanted to see this world. From the outside, but from the heart of it." Sari turned away, hiding the thoughtful look on her face. "To the glass tower," she told the guards. "Let him rest. He has earned that much." As John walked away, a young noble whispered to another, "Do you think he will serve the Empire?" The other shook her head. "I don't think he came to serve at all." That night, John stood at the edge of the glass room, looking down at the lights of the Valari capital. He wasn't free, not yet, but things were changing, and the princess who told him to bow was starting to wonder if she should have looked closer when he did. The next day, the skies over Zultran turned to deep gold. Twin suns rose slowly behind the silver towers of the Valari capital. From the glass tower, John Reyes stood silently. Watching the alien city breathe with life, he had passed the games of proving. No one expected that, especially not Sri Valtana. John knew that things had changed. The Valari nobles now looked at him with confusion, some with anger, others with interest. He was no longer just a prisoner. He was becoming something more, but not everyone liked that. Sari stood in the Hall of Voices, speaking with her advisors. Round her, shimmering screens displayed images of ships, soldiers, and planets. "He passed the games," said one noblewoman. "We can't ignore that." "Still human," said another. "Weak, unpredictable, dangerous." Sari did not answer right away. Her eyes were fixed on a screen showing John in the glass tower. Stood with his hands behind his back, calm, like he was exactly where he wanted to be. "Send him an invitation," she said at last. "He will join us today, in the Hall of Minds."
God.
The nobles looked shocked. "That's a room for strategy and discussion," said one. "Not for prisoners." Sari raised an eyebrow. He earned the right to prove himself. Later that day, John entered the Hall of Minds. The room was shaped like a star, with curved walls and floating maps of the galaxy. Nobles stood around. A glowing table where small ships and moving lights showed current conflicts and missions. John walked with quiet confidence. His uniform had been cleaned, his hair was tied back, his eyes were sharp. Sari nodded to him.
Hey, John Reyes.
"You may speak." John looked around. "You're fighting on 3 fronts," he said, pointing to the maps. 2 outer colonies are under threat from the Rakari, and 1 inner system is facing rebellion. The nobles frowned. "How do you know about that?" "Listen, John," said simply, "and I study. The Rakari always strike when your forces are stretched. Your fleets move like dancers, beautiful but slow. You leave your sides open." Sari tilted her head. "And what would a human do?" John stepped forward and pointed at one section of the map. "Here," he said. "You have a mining station in a dead system. It's useless to you, so the Rakari ignore it. If you hide a fast strike unit there, you can ambush them when they try to hit your colony on the edge." The nobles stared. The idea was bold, risky, clever. Sari smiled just a little. "We will test your plan." 3 days later, the battle happened exactly as John predicted. The Rakari moved toward the outer colony, and the hidden Valari fleet struck them from behind. Victory was quick. The court began to talk. John Reyes was no longer a curiosity. He was becoming a voice. A mind, and Sari noticed more than his tactics. She watched the way he moved, calm, careful, but never weak. He spoke little, but when he did, his words carried weight. He didn't ask for respect, he earned it, and yet something else was happening. They began to speak in private. First about war, then about culture, then about each other. One night they stood on a balcony overlooking the silver gardens of the palace. "You learn fast," Sari said. "I've had time," John replied. "Back on Earth, before I became a captain, I studied alien languages, customs, histories. Your people were the most fascinating." She looked at him. Even though we once saw humans as little more than noise in the stars, he smiled. Even more because of that. You're proud, complex, strong, but strength can be beautiful. Sari was silent for a moment. No human has ever stood in this garden, she said. John raised an eyebrow. Is that your way of saying I should leave? She chuckled softly. It's my way of saying you're not like the others. But not all the Valari nobles agreed with Sari's growing trust in John in the shadows of the court. Jealous voices whispered, he is manipulating her. He wants power. He's dangerous. One noble, Lord Varnith, had long planned to control the court through Zari's rise to the throne. But now, a human had ruined that path. And so, a plan began to form. The next morning, John was invited to a ceremony. Zari stood in full royal armor, holding a blade of light. A circle of nobles surrounded her. John Reyes, she said, you are to be tested once more not by games, but by truth. A servant stepped forward with a glowing box. Inside was a stone, smooth, silver, and ancient. The stone of echoes. It revealed the truth of one's mind. Showing secret thoughts and deep fears, John stepped forward and placed his hand on the stone. The stone glowed. Images appeared in the air John's past. Earth, his training, study of the Valari. His dreams of visiting their world, the nobles watched closely. Then an image of John, bowing before Zari. A whisper from the stone echoed in the chamber. He does not kneel in weakness. He kneels in strategy. The court gasped. Sorry, yes. Eyes narrowed. Explain. John removed his hand calmly. I did study your people. I did dream of this place. But I did not come to destroy you. I came to understand you. Bowing was never about fear. It was about earning a place where I could truly stand. For a moment, the hall was silent. Then Zari spoke. He has told the truth. His mind is clear. His respect is real. But Lord. Varnith stepped forward, his face cold. Even so, he knows too much. He is human. He is a danger. John looked at him calmly. The real danger is not knowledge. It is fear of change. Later that night, John returned to the glass tower once. Again. But things were no longer the same. He was not just a human. He was now a player in a dangerous game, the game of power and Zari. She was beginning to wonder. Did I ask him to bow? Or did I start to bow to something I didn't understand? The moon of Zoltran hung high above the capital, casting a soft silver glow across the palace towers. The city, as always, was alive. With quiet movement, lights floated between buildings. Guards marched in perfect rhythm. Sky ships glided like birds through the dark. But inside the royal palace, tension was rising. John Reyes stood once again in the hall of glass. Not as a prisoner, but still not fully free. He had passed the games of proving. He had given the court a victory through his military advice. He had even placed his hand on the stone of echoes, revealing that his mind was not filled with lies. And yet, some still doubted him, especially Lord Varnith. Sari Voltana stood in her private chambers, staring at a long holographic map of the Empire. Her thoughts were tangled like the stars above her. Her people respected her strength. They followed her into battle. But now, something new had entered her world. Something unexpected. A human, not a weak one, not a loud or foolish one, but a quiet, thoughtful one. One who bowed when needed, but never gave up his own mind. That was rare. Even among the Valeria, soft voice interrupted her thoughts. Your Highness, said her advisor, Lady Inari, you spend much time watching the human. Sari didn't look away from the map. He interests me. He also worries the court, Inari replied gently. And Lord Verneth gathers those who share. His view, let him gather, Sari said. If truth is on my side, I have nothing to fear. But her words were calm only on the surface. Deep inside, she felt the change coming, like a quiet storm, something that would shift the future of the Valari, and John Reyes was at the center of it. That same night, walked the edge of the palace gardens. A guard followed him, but gave him space. John touched the silver leaves of the alien trees. The air was soft and cool. He had dreamed of this place. It's not just the city, but being here as someone who mattered. But dreams were not always safe. Suddenly, he heard a whisper in the shadows. Human. He turned quickly. A cloaked figure stepped. From behind a crystal pillar, it was a young Valerie woman. Her eyes glowed with fear and urgency. "I don't have much time," she said. "You don't know what they're planning." John stepped closer, his voice calm. "Who are you?" "My name doesn't matter," she said. "But you must leave. Lord Varnith has summoned the Order of Blades. He wants to remove you." Quietly. John's eyes narrowed. "Assassins," she nodded. "He will make it look like an accident, or a failed escape, and he believes the princess will let it happen, to protect her position." John stayed silent for a moment. Then he spoke. "Thank you for the warning." The woman vanished back into the shadows. John did not chase her. He stood there thinking. This was no longer a game of survival. It was now a game of loyalty and trust. Early the next morning, the attack came. John was meditating in his glass room when the alarms blinked red. The guards outside his door fell quickly, silently. A shadow moved across the floor. The glass exploded. 4 masked assassins entered. Moving with speed and skill, John was ready. He rolled to the side, grabbed a long crystal shard, and used it like a blade. He moved with the calmness of someone who had trained for chaos. One assassin struck, but John caught their wrists and twisted. The figure fell. Another tried to stab him from behind, but John ducked and pushed them through the shattered wall, where they fell into the glowing air below. By the time Valari guards arrived, John stood alone, blood dripping from his arm, 2 unconscious attackers at his feet. Zari was among the first to enter. She looked at him, then at the broken glass. The assassins, the guards who had been defeated so icily. "You fought them," she said. John nodded. "They left me no choice." Zari stepped closer. "Do you think I ordered this?" He met her eyes. "I don't want to think that." Pause. The air between them was sharp. "I didn't," she said finally. But someone wanted to see." "If I'd stay silent if you were gone, and will you?" John asked. "No," she said. "Not now." Later that day, the High Court gathered again. Zari stood at the center, her voice strong and clear. "There has been an attack within these walls. An illegal one. A cowardly one." The nobles looked nervous. Whispers filled the chamber. "Assassins were sent against John Reyes, a man under royal protection." She turned, her eyes falling on Lord Varnith. "And the orders came from you." Gasps echoed. Varnith stepped forward. "You cannot prove that." Zari lifted her hand. A hologram appeared. The cloaked woman who warned John had come forward. Her message had been recorded. "You wanted him removed," Zari said. "Not because he was dangerous, but because he made you afraid."
I
Said nothing. The Empress, watching from her high seat, gave a single nod. "Lord Varnith," she said, "you are stripped of title and sent into exile." That evening, as the sun set over Zoltran, John stood beside Zari once more. "You didn't have to protect me," he said. "Yes, I did," she replied. "You've shown us something we forgot." "What's that?" "That power isn't just force or pride. It's understanding, honor, patience, and even in quiet there is strength." They stood together in silence. Then she looked at him. "You bowed when I told you to? But now I wonder." "Yes." She smiled softly. "Now I see that I may have been the one standing too tall." Well, John chuckled. "Maybe we both met in the middle." The stars above Zeltron blinked quietly. A new chapter was beginning, in the human who once came in chains. A future queen. Days passed quietly in the palace of Zeltran, but the silence was not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that comes before great change. The people of the Valari Empire whispered about John Reyes, the human who stood beside Princess Zari Voltana. Some called him lucky, some called him dangerous, but most now called him something new, respected. John had earned his place with strength, skill, and calm wisdom. But he knew this new role came with risks. Not all enemies wore masks or carried weapons. Some smiled in court, wore fine robes, and hid poison behind their words. And in this court of power and pride, John's very presence was still a challenge. 1. Morning, John stood at the edge of a sky bridge, looking down at the glowing gardens. Sari joined him, her robes flowing like silver flame. "You look thoughtful." "Shh," she said. "I always am," he replied with a smile. "You think we're still not safe?" "I think safety is an illusion," John said. "But some illusions are worth protecting." Sari looked out over the horizon. "The Empress has invited you to speak before the High Council." John raised an eyebrow. "She wants to test you. Not just as a warrior, but as a voice." He nodded slowly. "Then I'll speak." The next day, the High Council of the Valerie gathered in the Celestial Hall. It was a place of history and honor. With floating symbols of every star system in the Empire glowing above the circle of seats, at the center stood John Reyestal, calm, human. The Empress herself sat at the highest seat, her gaze sharp and thoughtful. "You may speak," she said. John looked around the chamber. Eyes full of judgment stared back at him, some curious and cold, some full of quiet admiration. He took a breath. "I stand here not as a conqueror nor as a guest," he began. "I am a man from a world that your empire once ignored, perhaps, even feared." Murmurs spread. "But I am not here to ask for forgiveness. I am here to offer something better, understanding." The room quieted. Humans are not perfect. We are stubborn, loud, strange even. But we are also strong in ways not always seen. We don't give up easily. We don't bend when we believe something matters. And we learn very fast. He turned. "Slowly meeting the gaze of every noble, your empire is vast. But it is changing. Enemies grow at the edge of your maps. Old ways no longer answer new threats. You need more than strength. You need allies who think differently." The Empress leaned forward slightly. "And you believe humans can be such allies?" she asked. John nodded. "I believe some of us can. Just as not all Valari are wise, not all humans are fools. Judge us by action, not by origin." The chamber fell into deep silence. Then the Empress stood. "You speak clearly," she said, with honesty. "That is rare here." She looked at Sari, then back to John. "The council will decide your status by vote. Leave us." John walked back to the palace without saying much. That night, he and Sari stood on the balcony once again. Stars above them were brighter than ever. "You spoke like one of us," she said softly. "I spoke like myself," he replied. That was enough. She turned to him. "You've changed the court." And me, he met her eyes. "And you've changed me." There was a long silence between them. A soft wind moved through the silver trees. Sari looked up. "When I told you to bow, I didn't understand what I was asking." "I did," John said. "And now?" "Now," he said, "we stand side by side." The next morning, the decision came. John was summoned to the court once again. The Empress rose and declared the council's ruling. "John Reyes of Earth, you are no longer a prisoner. You are no longer an outsider. You are now an honored advisor to the Empire." Gasps echoed through the hall, and the Empress continued. "You will serve as the first ambassador between the Valeri and the worlds of humanity." John bowed. "Deeply thank you, Empress," he said. "I will not fail this trust." She nodded once. "See that you don't." Later, in private, Sari met with John again. "You've done it," she said. He smiled. "No, we did." She stepped closer. "Do you know what comes next?" "Trouble," he guessed. She laughed. "Yes, but also opportunity. New contact with humans, new diplomacy, maybe even friendship." John looked at her. "Maybe more than that." They stood close now, the light of the twin suns rising behind them. "You were my prisoner," she said. "And you were my challenge," he replied. "Now, they were neither. They were something new, but far away, in the outer stars. Others watched in. The darkness beyond the edge of Valar space, a new enemy was stirring. one who had no interest in alliances, one who believed that both humans and Valar had grown soft, and that the time had come for conquest. For a time, peace settled over the Valari Empire. John Reyes, once a stranger and prisoner, now walked freely through the halls of power. He advised on trade, helped design new military training methods, and even spoke with visitors from distant star systems. Many Valari nobles, once cold toward him, now respected him. A few still watched with suspicion, but none could deny his value. Beside him, Princess Sari Veltana grew stronger as a leader. Her voice in the High Council was now louder than ever. Together, they were changing the Empire's future, but far beyond the peaceful systems of the Valari. Something was stirring, something old, something violent. It began with a whisper from a border station. A mining outpost on the edge of Valari space stopped sending messages. Then, a trade ship vanished. Near the same sector, no distress call, no wreckage, just silence. John sat in the command room, looking at the reports. A blinking red line marked the location on a holographic star map. "This isn't normal," he said. General Sarvik, a battle-scarred Valari officer, nodded slowly. "No storms in that region. Don't. Strange." Sari leaned forward.
What?
"We need to send scouts." Sarvik hesitated. "Your Highness, if it is an enemy, we risk their lives." Sari looked at John. "What do you think?" John's voice was steady. "If something is out there, it's already watching us. We can't hide behind fear. We go carefully." Gave the order. Send a stealth team. Quiet, fast, and ready. 3 days later, a scout ship returned. Barely it was damaged, scorched, and limping into orbit. Only one pilot survived. He was carried into the medbay, pale and shaking. John and Zari stood beside his recovery bed as he spoke with dry lips. They came out of the dark. Ships shaped like knives. No warnings, no symbols. "Who?" Zari asked softly. "Not. Pirates not known," the pilot whispered. "They cut through our defenses like paper. No mercy, no fear." John stepped closer. "Did they say anything?" The pilot's eyes opened wide. They said, ... We were weak, and that the age of soft empires is over." Then he passed out. The room fell silent. John's mind worked. Quickly, an unknown force advanced, hostile. Watching this was not just a pirate, gang, or some rebel cell. This was war, and it had already started. That evening, John and Zari stood in her war chamber. "We need to warn the Empress," Zari said. John nodded. "And prepare fast. But the council will move slowly. They always debate first. Study things too long, and we do what we can while they argue," John said. "We plan, we build, and we make sure we're ready when they finally open." Their eyes, Zari looked at him. "You think like a soldier," John replied, "and you lead like a warrior." A few days later, John was in the training hall with Valari cadets. He watched them spar fast, graceful, but predictable. "You move like dancers," he said. "Beautiful, but not enough." The cadets looked confused. "Enemies won't wait. For a perfect strike," he continued, "they'll hit you from behind, from above, from every direction. You must learn to fight like humans do." The room grew quiet. "Show us," one cadet challenged. John smiled, and then he moved. He disarmed one with a twist, ducked under another, and used gravity to throw a third off balance. When he finished, all 3 were on the ground. The others watched in awe. "Learn this," John said, "or the war will teach you the hard way." Meanwhile, in deep space, a fleet of dark ships floated like shadows. Each one was sharp, black, and silent. Inside the command vessel, a tall, armored figure stood. His name was Warlord Tyrax. He was not of the Valari or of Earth. He belonged to an ancient race forgotten by most civilizations, a race that believed in one rule: strength rules. The weak serve or fall. He watched recordings of Valari ships, of their peaceful cities, of their debates. Soft, he growled. They've lived too long in light. A commander beside him spoke. And the human. T-Rox narrowed his glowing eyes, curious, but still soft, like the rest. He pointed to the map. We strike next at the twin moons. They won't expect it. The fleet began to move. Back on Zoltran. John met with Zari in the garden at night. I've seen enemies like this before, John said. Back on Earth, some fight for power, some for land. But the worst fight, because they believe they are chosen better than others. Zari nodded, like Warlord Tyrax. He looked at her. You've heard the name? She nodded. Our deep records say his people once ruled in darkness. Long before the Valari rose, we thought they vanished. John said grimly, they're back, and they see us as weak. Zari looked at the stars. Then we must show them they are wrong. The next morning, the Empress called a full council. John stood beside Zari as she made her case. This enemy does not want peace. They do not ask for land or trade. They want to break us. Some nobles argued, some feared war. But then John stepped forward. In the past, your empire would have stood proud and alone, he said. But now is not the time for pride. It is time for unity. He looked across the room. We humans are not many here. But we will stand with you. Others will join too, if we ask. The Empress rose. Then we prepare, she said. And with those words, the Empire began to wake. Ships were called home. Soldiers trained harder. Scientists built new defenses. Kay's old allies were contacted. And John Reyes, the human who once stood in chains, was now preparing for a battle that could shape the stars. But the enemy was coming faster than expected because T-Rex had already set his sights on Zoltron itself, and his fleet was already moving through the dark. The stars over Zoltron were no longer calm. Alarms echoed across the palace. Red lights glowed on every tower. Civilian ships rushed to leave the planet. Soldiers ran to their posts. Skies once peaceful and bright were now filled with tension. The enemy had arrived. Warlord Tyrax's fleet had entered orbit without warning. Dozens of black, blade-like warships blocked the light from Zoltron's suns. They moved with cold, mechanical precision, silent, ready. Unafraid from the palace tower, John Reyes looked up at the dark shapes in the sky. They're not wasting time, he said. Zari stood beside him in full armor, her eyes hard. Neither should we. The Empress gathered her top commanders. John and Zari stood at the center of the war table. Tyrax will strike first at the city shields, said General Sarvik. Then the command towers. Once they fall, he'll move on the palace. And he wants fear more than destruction, John added. Wants the people to surrender before he even lands. Or slammed her hand on the table. Then we hold him at the skies. We give our people hope. The Empress nodded. The command is yours, Princess, and yours, human. John was ready. The battle began within the hour. Valari warships rose from the planet like birds of fire, joining in tight formations. Their silver hulls shimmered in the sunlight as they met the incoming darkness. From orbit, Tyrax watched from the bridge of his flagship. Let them fight, he said. They will learn fear. His ships opened fire. Beams of red energy lanced across the sky. Explosions lit the heavens. The air trembled, but the Valari fought well. John and Zari coordinated from the ground, watching the battle unfold in real time. Their signals guided fighters, protected weak points, pushed the enemy back inch by inch. John used Earth strategies, feints, traps, sudden dives, and the enemy began to struggle. They didn't expect this, he said with a grin. Zari smiled. They forgot humans adapt. But Tyrax wasn't done. He sent dropships through the gaps in the battle lines. Black pods slammed into the surface. Near Zeltron's outer walls, from them came tall, armored warriors, cold, silent, brutal. They carried shock blades and dark rifles. They moved quickly toward the capital. We need ground forces now, Sari ordered. John stood. I'm going too. Sari turned to him, surprised. It's dangerous. So is doing nothing? She looked at him for a moment, then nodded. Stay alive. John smiled. Always. John joined a squad of Valerie soldiers on the city walls. Explosions lit the skyline. Plasma bolts flew through the air. The enemy was strong, fast, and showed no fear, but neither did John. He fought with quick moves and calm focus. He ducked, rolled, and used every trick he had learned on Earth and in Valerie training. His rifle was steady. His blade was swift. At one point, an enemy warrior charged straight for him. John met the charge head-on, dodged the first strike, brought the enemy down with a low sweep. The Valari soldiers around him cheered. Fight like the human. One shouted. The battle on the ground turned above. Sari led a final charge with her fleet. She directed the strongest warships into the heart of Tyrex's fleet. Her own ship took heavy hits, but she held her position. Then a message came. Enemy. Flagship, heading toward the palace. It was Tyrex. He was coming down himself. Sari returned to the palace as the flagship descended like a dark mountain. Its engines roared as it landed in the royal courtyard. Tyrex emerged, tall and armored in black, his red eyes glowing. Behind him stood 10 elite warriors. Sari waited at the steps. I warned your kind, Tyrex growled. Soft empires fall. I warned yours, Sari replied. We are not soft anymore. Tyrex raised his weapon. Suddenly a voice called out behind him. She's not alone. John Reyes stepped forward from the shadows, armor dented, blood on his cheek, but eyes full of fire. Tyrex turned. You again? John raised his sword. Me again. The final battle was fast and brutal. Sari and John fought side by side. One, with the grace of a Valerie princess, the other with the stubborn will of a human soldier. Tyrex was strong. His strikes cracked the stone floor. His roar echoed through the palace, but John and Sari fought together like one. When John was knocked down, Sari stood over him. When Sari slipped, John caught her blade, and in the final moment, they struck as one John's blade from below. Sari, yes. From above, Tyrex fell. The remaining enemies surrendered. The war was over. Later, the people gathered in the great hall. The Empress stood before them. Today, we stood not as many species, she said, but as one. Cheers filled the hall. She turned to John and Sari. To you, John Reyes, human of Earth, you have shown us courage, wisdom, and strength. You are no longer our guest. You are our hero. John bowed. But this time, it was not in fear. It was in respect. Sari smiled beside him. You did it, she whispered. We did, he replied. That night, under the stars, they walked through the quiet gardens. The galaxy will remember this day, Sari said. Good, John answered. Let it remember that humans don't bow easily, she laughed. No, you rise. They looked at the stars. Side by side, a new future had begun. Together, the end.